I was driving for more than 5 years in my home country before I came to the UK, but it took me 5 attempts of the driving test to finally pass. In this video, I'm going to be sharing things I wish that I knew and some tips that I learned along the way. Hi guys, my name is Sisi and I'm a Ugandan medical doctor working in the UK, and I took the driving test 5 times before passing. That's the UK practical driving test, and guys, it felt like it was even harder than like PLAB or all these other exams. I don't know why, but anyways, so I'm going to share 10 tips that I found really helpful that finally helped me to pass. The first tip is to keep calm. You want to keep as calm as you can, because I feel like something that really helped me back was suddenly I started getting anxiety when it was time for the exam. Like, I would be doing my practice and it was fine, but then I would go for the driving test and I would be so nervous. I had so much pressure on myself, must pass, can't fail, but in the end I would end up failing because I would be so nervous. I end up making silly mistakes. Some level of anxiety is good because it keeps you alert and aware and looking for danger, which is fine. But when it's too much, then it's going to be like a disadvantage. So find ways to keep as calm as you can. Personally, I tried out everything that I could. I basically did CBT on myself to be as calm as possible, controlling my thoughts. I used grounding techniques. I used a steering wheel as something to ground me and keep me in the present moment and stop overthinking. My next tip is to focus on one road at a time. So when you're doing your driving test, try not to think and figure out where you're going, especially when you know the area like I did. You start thinking like, oh, now we're on this roundabout, where are we going? Are we going here? Are we going there? Are we going this way? And then you stop focusing on what you're doing, which is there and then. So try and make sure that as you're doing a driving test, try to make sure that you can find a way to get yourself from the end of the road to the next. Just look at one road at a time. Look at the next junction when you get there, the next roundabout when you get there. Try not to be thinking too far in advance, because at the end of the day I feel like this kind of helped me back. My next tip should have been my first one actually, and that is get a good driving instructor. So I had a driving instructor who I felt like we didn't really get along. So I did not like his style, so I felt like there was a bit of tension. I was constantly on edge. I wasn't comfortable. You know, the kind of instructor that takes the driving wheel away from you, that kind of person that would just raise my anxiety levels. So I felt like that instructor was not a right fit for me. So if you go with an instructor and you feel like you're not getting along, my advice is to just change, because when I changed and I got a new driving instructor, honestly guys, it was such a big difference. I was suddenly calm, I was more confident, like I knew what I was doing because I had been driving, remember. But then this other instructor would bring out like a lot of anxiety in me, and the new instructor really did a good job. So my advice is to get a good instructor and also follow what they tell you guys. If the instructor thinks you're not ready, you're probably not. So a few times with one of my instructors, they were like, I don't think you're ready, and I insisted and went and got a driving test and still I failed. So probably follow what your instructor is saying. If you do trust them and you have a good relationship with them, then follow the instructor's advice. My next tip is to do 1-hour lessons. So I don't know about you, but for me, I had 2 different instructors, and so for one time I tried doing 2-hour lessons, and with another one I was doing 1-hour lessons. And in the 1-hour lesson I felt like it was more helpful. Like in the 1 hour we're able to drive around, I'll do everything, and in the 2 hours, by the end of that 1.5 hours, I'm exhausted, and then you have to keep driving, and then I'll start making silly mistakes. So really I found that the 1-hour lesson was the perfect time for me. My next tip is to use YouTube videos. There are loads of YouTube channels. I'll link a few below that I really liked. One that I really enjoyed was Conquer Driving. Another one is called DGN Driving, and also Crowley Driving. So try and find driving instructors that have videos, especially if they have in your area, because some areas do have. So in the area where I live, we do have YouTube channels that show exactly the big roundabouts, the tricky ones, and so that way, by the time you go in the lesson to practice, you don't have so much time wasted on the side of the road, because you know there's a lot of theory that you need to know. You need to know about the exits, the lanes, and all that. So if you can try and learn as much as you can before going for your driving test, it's going to save you a lot of money, because first of all, you're not going to have a 1-hour lessons and then like 30 minutes of the lesson you parked by the side of the road with the instructor explaining things. So try and get a lot of information prior to your exam. I also followed a lot of their advice, because they explain exactly things that maybe sometimes the instructor is only one person, but in the world of YouTube you can find so many different instructors. Find the one who you like and then get lots of information, because it's hard for one person to know everything, but you can get so much more information from very many instructors online. My next step is to try and unlearn some old habits. So if you've been driving for a long time in another country like I was, you're going to have so many things that are ingrained in you and you don't even realize it until you go and the instructor is like, what are you doing? For instance, I was constantly overtaking from the left, doing all kinds of things that were really normal back home, but here you can really get into an accident. It's really unsafe. So you're going to do a lot of practice, because you're going to start and unlearn all those old habits and then learn new ones as well. My next tip is to use driving test cancellation app if you want, or just keep refreshing frequently. So personally, I used driving test for all, I used Testy, and I also used another one called driving test cancellations. And for each time I used each of them, they did get me an earlier test. The only problem is make sure you do not have them all activated at the same time, because then if you do, they might be antagonizing each other. So use one at a time and just be patient. And one other time I just was so impatient and I just decided to refresh on my own, because there's a time where you're waiting and you're not getting any tests, and yet if you search, you're able to get one on your own. Using a driving test cancellation app is good, but also refreshing on your own is also good. So I used to refresh all day. Every time I have a minute, I would be refreshing. I lived on the gov.uk website, guys, trying to look for a test date, because it can be really hard to get it, especially if you have responsibilities. You want to start driving as soon as you can. So do try considering either using the cancellation apps or refreshing on your own. My next tip is to don't assume that you have failed. There's times where you see, oh my god, I think we're going back to the test center, because remember with the driving test now, because of COVID, once you make a major error, that is it. Your test ends, you start going back to the test center. So in my final test, which is the one that I passed, I assumed I had failed, because I saw the guy taking me at the roundabout that was taking me back, and my heart was pumping, but I was like, all right, let me just keep calm and just continue. And we passed the center and went in the other direction. So you never know. So it's best not to assume that you have failed. Even if you think you've failed, just keep going, because you might not have. You never know what's going on. So if you think you've failed and then you act like you have, then you probably end up failing. So just keep on driving, stay calm, and hope for the best. And my last tip, guys, also is don't assume that you have passed, because in 2 of my tests I failed at the last minute, because I felt like, yes, I have passed this test, I've done it. We have driven for the entire period, and now we're going back to the test center at the end of the test, and I was just starting to celebrate in my head and I started paying attention, and then I made a mistake. I think I missed like a red light, like some major error, and that was it for me. And that was really painful, because that particular driving test was like my best. I had like no other minors and just one major. So guys, do not assume that you have passed equally. So just keep driving and only know the test is over when you're back to the test center and you've switched off the engine. I hope the tips are helpful. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to watch more videos like this, then please do subscribe. After you pass the driving test, you're going to want to buy a car, and if you want to know what steps you should follow to do this, then watch this video next.